Welcome, everyone. My name is Allison Merker Garner, and I am the creator and author of Musical Minds. This video focuses on Musical Minds Volume 2. Musical Minds Volume 2 follows Musical Minds Volume 1. Volume 1, in another video, goes through for pre-instrumental and early beginner, like pre-Twinkle and maybe the beginning of book 1 for Suzuki students in violin, viola, cello, and piano. It is an aesthetics approach. So the things that we do in the first volume are all having to do with the body, so that concepts, techniques, all of the things that they're developing at this stage of the game, beginning an instrument, are being embodied. That means that they're not just developing a kind of understanding of how to put a finger down or what forte may sound like, but they're actually involving their whole selves into the understanding and the knowledge that is behind that concept. So the work is cumulative. What that means is we start in volume 1 and take what we learned in 1 and apply it to the instrument more in volume 2. So some of the same songs show up, some of the same activities show up, but they're more complex. Instead of doing as much of the movement, as much of the playing other instruments, as much of the visual stimulation, we are now applying those more directly to the instrument in the form of improvisation, in the form of composition and arranging, score reading, some early chamber music, and reading skills. And we take the same repertoire that we use away from the instrument with the instrument to practice certain skills or to learn to read or to be able to play with other people or to create a composition. So we're now musicking in volume 2. And this is what I consider the core curriculum of Musical Minds, because this is where we really get into the curriculum as it is, where we'll start and we'll go through this, but in the textbook, we'll start with a pitch pattern and a rhythmic pattern. And then we'll place those in different contexts to listen to interact with, to read, to play, to be able to apply it in a creative situation, and where that's found in the repertoire. So there'll be music on the CDs that walk you through, my voice will walk you through all the different things that you can do, like the dictation or the being able to do an activity or something like that. I will walk you through all that. But there'll also be the music that is applicable to what we're learning and the music history behind it. So there's 6 CDs. There's 6 CDs for Musical Minds Volume 2. And there's so many CDs because I do walk you through it. And here's an example of that, because I'm not going to interrupt what we're doing with the book to bring this in. But here is the program for Musical Minds CD 1. It's the Handel CD. Now it looks like this. And we have track 1 is the lesson on rhythm. Track 2, we have a couple of excerpts of pieces to listen to and to do things with. Track 4 is rhythmic dictation. Track 5 is a song that's sung by a singer and a guitarist accompanying that we use in our class. Track 6 is another lesson on melodic patterns. Track 7, the songs that illustrate those melodic patterns in that key, and we start with C major. And then moving on to tetrachords, ear training, all the examples of intervals, triads, inversions, they're all on here. And we end with Handel's Water Music. And we have an activity or a lesson around that to bring all of these different aspects of understanding these concepts together. So this is Musical Minds 2. It's the heart of the method. Once again, it does not need to be exclusive. It can be used as a supplementary text. There's a reading book that goes with it. The reading book follows right along with the textbook. You can use it or not. The reading examples in there are for all the instruments, violin, viola, cello, and piano. And I do that intentionally so that the kids can see what everybody else is doing. I think that's important to see the score. When we get into the more advanced material in volumes 3 and 4, then I have both the score and the individual parts with flexible instrumentation. But here, we're just doing snippets of songs. We're not doing anything that would be performed. We're doing a lot of canons in the reading book, and we're doing the basic ways you will see melody and harmony, like chords or bottom notes, a bass line to a melody, that kind of thing. So you'll see all of that in the reading book, and it just illustrates from a reading standpoint what we're doing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the reading book today. I'll show it to you, but we're not going to spend much time on it because it's really the textbook but reading. So let's get started. We're going to look at the textbook here. And the textbook, here's what it looks like. I had a really fun time putting this together. I got a graphic designer to help me organize these reproductions, but they're really, really beautiful to look at. And when we look at this book also, you will find a lot of poetry, snippets of songs that were written. And so one reason why it is such a big undertaking is all the permissions. So there were a lot of permissions I had to get to be able to use some of the art and the poetry mostly that are represented in this book. So here's the table of contents. The first unit is, or it's kind of a pre-unit, it's the introduction, rhythm and review of rhythm and melody. So it takes a little bit of volume 1 here. Now, here's something that I want to point out, because Suzuki teachers are gonna they're gonna have something to say about it. So I start every chapter. Here's unit 2. We'll get into that. I start every chapter with a rhythmic pattern. I teach rhythm not just orally, but symbolically when we're reading, as patterns, not as individual notes. So you will see here the rhythm, and then you will see 2 lines. One will be run fast, walk slow, jump high, swing low. And the other will be 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and. The reason why I have this here is because some teachers use language to teach rhythm. The Orff method, the music learning theory that Edwin Gordon used, a lot of Kodály teachers will use words. And oftentimes when we read, we'll do that too as Suzuki teachers. So that is why it's there. It's not, I'm not insisting that you use it. Now, one thing that I will say about it though, it's not the words that you would see in another method. These words actually relate, correspond well to our language and to the rhythm. So run, walk, jump, swing are quarter notes. If we want to make them into eighth notes, we add the identifier: run fast, walk slow, jump high, swing low. And you will find that when we get into LYs or EDs or INGs or whatever later on, you're actually not saying nonsense syllables. You're actually saying real phrases. So it is more meaningful, right? I also am deliberately using movement words because that also is something that's meaningful to the kids, that will stick in their minds more and they have an image for. It actually is something that can be embodied better. So it's not an idle or random thing. It's not arbitrary. So on the CD, you will get a preparation, in this case, 2 chants. You'll get something that presents the concept of this rhythm. And then you will get the practice of that, where you can memorize, have the child memorize and imitate what you say or do in that rhythm. And then opportunities to improvise that. So that is also on the CD. I present a rhythm. There's a space for a child to respond to it, either exactly as is or a little different. And then placing it within the context of Twinkle, which is something that just about every beginning child student plays. All right. And then we have the variations on this rhythm that are possible with the words and with the symbols, right? Placing it within a context so you can write it. So we're not just learning the rhythm, we're learning to play with the rhythm right away. We're being creative with it. We're writing, we're reading, we're saying, we're doing, we're moving, we're doing all of those things. We're embodying the concept. And embodiment is something that really caught on with somatic therapy with Peter Levine and the 70s and 80s when he was first getting started. The idea that for deep learning, we need to embody something. And what that means is to use the body and the mind in all ways. And the more we can use sensory input, the better. So if we have visual and aural and kinesthetic, it further deepens the knowledge. All right. Now here, this is something else. See Musical Minds 2 reading book, pages 5 through 8. That is only if you want to use it. It's there as a supplement for a reading activity. If you want to supplement this as a reading activity with the instrument, there you go. But you may not want to do that. So this is all done sequentially. There is no flipping back and forth and, trying to keep up with it. You just put the CD on and you follow the textbook. And if you want to add the reading book, that is up to you, and it's put in there in gold. So, and then we have placing these rhythms in form, right? So now we're extending our knowledge, and then we have dictation. And now we've got the handle tracks. And let me put that back here. So what are we listening for? Well, we're listening for ostinato, or we're listening for a rhythm, right? And then we've got here the melodic patterns we're reviewing are mi, re, do, so, mi, la, and do, mi, so. That's dun, 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 bum, bum. So the triad. All right. And then we have the tunes that prepare for that have those patterns in them. We may review the activities from book one. We may do those things first before we try them on the instrument and playing them by ear. We may do those as a way of a starting point before we change the rhythm or the melody to another pattern and create a new tune. So this is a starting point, and we're reviewing, but we're reviewing what we did in book one with a whole lot more intelligence and sophistication, right? So these are all on the CD. You don't have to figure it out. Just play the CD and follow along with the book. And then ear training, right? And then we have an extension of what we learned in book one. Here we're starting into arpeggios and reversing. So we can do so, mi, do, or we could do do, mi, so. So reversing the order of those patterns and exploring what that would be like and what those intervals are and how that would look on a keyboard. How would that look on your instrument if you were a string player, right? And many, many, many activities of that. And in here, I introduce the idea that we will be following through with in this book, whereby we have two tetrachords that we connect together to create a scale. And if we look at tetrachords for a major scale, they are the same intervals. So if you are fingering on an instrument, unless you're a cellist, it's going to be the same fingering on the adjacent strings and the same interval relationships. So I do that deliberately. Now, if we go into minor, which we will eventually, then we do melodic minor. So we have a minor, here's a minor scale. So we have a minor tetrachord and a major tetrachord. So that's a little different, but it is only going up. We don't do the going down. Okay. So all of this is the introduction. And let's go on to the next unit. Okay. Here's unit 1A. Let's go on into unit 1B. So I go through all the keys and their relative, let's see, tonic C major, C minor, so the relative minor to the major, and then the dominant for those two. And so we go through all the keys, or most of them. I don't get into things like G flat major or anything like that, but I go up to B flat and up to A major for the sharps and the flats, and their parallels and the dominant for that key. And so when we are reading in that, when we're singing in that, when we're playing in that, we actually do use those keys. And then we get into what we can do with them. If we have a pattern that's a tetrachord, how can we change the order of the notes? And then we have new notes, don't we? If we do an inversion of it, if we do the retrograde of it, the retrograde inversion of it, right? That's not to memorize, that's not to practice, it's just to to open up the context and that thinking that look at all these things we can do with that. And some kids really get into it because they have those kinds of minds. It's a good introduction into Bach. But and others, just to know that it exists is enough, right? So here we go into all of the different patterns that you find in the key and all the different ways of enjoying it. And this particular activity or this unit ends with Rakes of Mallow, common folk tune, but we're doing it in C major, right? But then we work with it in terms of two ways. Harmony is being introduced, right? So we've got a harmony, and we have also, we start to transpose. So the fingering here is for the pianists. The violinists don't have a fingering there. And then moving on, so we're getting into some cadences, 1-5-1, right? And then this particular section ends with a Haydn, whoops, and Mozart Turkish March. Okay, and we get into a little bit of the historical period, what's going on in the poetry, what's going on in the art and the architecture of that time. So we're getting a little bit more. Here's a poem from that period, the William Blake. So all of these things are ways of creating an imaginative and creative context for children to understand where this comes from. They're not just learning a certain rhythm or a certain key and a scale out of that key, but they're encouraged to play with it all the time. And as I say, that's why there's 6 CDs. These are all on the CDs. So you can be doing, here is the rhythm for this: run, fast, slow. All right. Moving on. So you know the format now, how this works. We go from patterns and start developing our thinking and our experience into different repertoire, into different ways of musicking, and we apply it to the instrument. All of these are on the CD. So here's coming to the end of Unit 1. And I'm flipping through it so you get some idea of what the scope is. Okay, so Unit 2. Whoops. This is still 1, isn't it? Because of the triplets. So let's look at some things from Unit 2. We get into compound meter, and we get into some of the flat keys. So here's one. Oh, this is still Unit 1. It's the end of it. Glide along, hop-ito. So we have the glide, hop. And we can do skip along, tip-ito, if we'd rather do the other language that I offer earlier for the compound meter. So I'm not finding it right away. There's B flat. So this gives you an idea of Unit 1 and the introduction. Unit 2 gets into the fun stuff. This is when we get into a lot of sonorities, because we're getting into polyrhythms, we're getting into quartal chords, we're getting into mixed meter, we're getting into chromaticism, 12 tone, all of that kind of stuff. And and all of these are on the CD. But this gives you an idea of how much we do into that. A little bit on composers, a little bit on the kinds of chords that are developing. We just keep stacking thirds on thirds and thirds, and we get new sonorities out of those. Okay, and then here we get into the 20th century minimalism and after Impressionism. So once again, lots of art, lots of activities that are art activities, things we can look at. We can write a 12-tone piece, all of this kind of stuff, right? So we're in now to the appendices. The appendix has the basic patterns in all the keys that we did, and some reading, and in all of the instruments, and also some of the tunes we've got sonorities if you want to see where those sonorities come from and where to find them on the piano keyboard. If you're not a pianist, feel uncertain about that. So here we've got a huge amount of, and then an index. We have a huge amount of, and glossary information in Musical Minds 2. And it is my pride and joy, I have to say. It is really complete. It is systematic. It takes all of the aesthetic stuff and condenses it in some ways into ways of musicking, and it expands it in other ways and placing it in the context of music history or music theory or arranging or whatever it is that is being introduced. So that is Musical Minds Volume 2. It is appropriate for kids, I would say 7 or 8 and up. If you did only the things that are, well, it depends, because a lot of the things that are examples in here, you can go as deeply as you want. You can supplement, or you can add another layer of knowing it, or as far as you want to go. And those are outlined in the CD and in the book. But you may not want to do that. You may have a younger class is not as advanced, and you're thinking, nah, I'm just going to do the activity of the folk tune and maybe add an ostinato and a bordun, and we're done. And that's great too. So this is a resource for you as much as it is a workbook for the child to follow. So this is Musical Minds Volume 2. The next 2 volumes are threefold. Volume 3 is Baroque mostly, a little early classical, and Volume 4 is late classical going into Romantic period. And that you'll find the textbook is not that thick because most of it is doing. There's within each of those, there's a resource book, a reading book, and a textbook, and supplementary chamber music, piano trios, duets, flexible instrumentation for the Baroque, because that's the way they did it, performance practice, all of that kind of thing, and then string quartet in the 4th book. So I will do videos on those as well if you're interested in that level. That would be getting in from book 3 on up if you're a Suzuki student. And once again, you can go as deep and as complicated as you wish. You can keep it simple. You can make it more advanced. So I will see you there. Thank you.